Hello,
I'm Savannah.
and I'm Elysia.
And this is Burden of Proof. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
If you made it through Corpsewood Manor,
Yeah.
we're back for another weird one today.
Yes.
We've
Yes,
had
we
some-
are.
Had some good cases the last few weeks. I'm excited.
Yes. I'm excited about this, and it's unlike me to choose something without a lot of legal stuff, but you'll see why. Because it's just kind of like Corpsewood Manor. It's just unbelievable. You're like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as outlandish. It's just so, it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how, if anybody would even think to use it in a fictional story, because you'd think there's no way.
Right.
There's no way somebody
Right.
would get away with this. So,
I'm excited.
that being said, couple disclaimers. Like I said, not really a court case, but there is a little legal lesson. But I'll wait till the end to talk about that.
Okay.
I don't want it to be too disruptive to the story itself.
Right.
Also, never mind. Scratch that. I don't want to give too much away.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm ready. I honestly have no idea.
I have purposely
I
kept
know.
quiet because I'm always giving little clues to you
Yeah.
about the story. And this one is so wild. I mean, it is and it's not, but it is.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'm like a little kid just waiting. Like Christmas morning.
I'm excited. Let's do it.
Okay. So if you've read the title, which Savannah doesn't know yet,
Yeah, I have no idea.
this is the story of the murder of Reyna Marroquin. I know my accent. Listen, I'm American. I am terrible at rolling R's.
I can't do it either.
Marroquin, but it looks like Marroquin,
Marroquin.
but it's pronounced. You're supposed to roll the R's. I'm terrible at it. My apologies for any listeners.
Yeah,
I'm so
all right.
sorry. She is also known as the Lady in the Barrel.
Oh, okay.
Do you know
Okay.
this story?
I've literally only heard that bit.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued and I'm ready.
Okay. So picture it. September of 1999 in the suburb of Jericho, Long Island, New York.
Long Island.
Mm-hmm. Homeowner Ron Cohen and his wife made the decision to move since their children were getting older. You know, you just go, time to move on. Maybe they were downsizing. The 10 years had been fairly good in the home, despite several strange and potentially paranormal experiences.
Ooh.
Nevertheless, the family was ready to move on. And Ron says in his interview that their nanny really truly believed that their house was haunted, and he was always skeptical. But by the end of our story, Ron really came to believe that it was possible. Upon the buyers of the home doing their final walkthrough, they specified that they wanted the Cohens to clear everything out of the crawl space under the back
Yeah.
porch.
That's fair. You don't want other people's junk in your storage space.
Yeah. Well, this turned out to be a real-life horror story for Ron Cohen and his family.
Judging by the title, I believe you.
When they had bought the home, the Cohens did not make the same request, and the sellers had left a 55-gallon drum or barrel in the back of that space, like pushed all the way back. It was really just a space that they used to store things like coolers, beach chairs, etc. So the barrel was never a problem. It was never in the way. They just left it.
I can relate because literally this week, we've lived in this house a year and a half, the house that Nicholas and I live in.
Mm-hmm.
And this week I cleaned out a closet and I threw away half a trash bags full of stuff that wasn't ours. It was the previous renters. It was cleaning supplies. So I had left it and I was just like, oh, maybe I'll go through it. And now I was like, oh, I'm not going to use these things.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't throw them away because they're cleaning supplies, but I took them to the cleaning refuge. But anyway,
Yeah.
like my point is sometimes you just leave stuff.
Yeah. Every house that my husband and I have ever rented or bought has had stuff left behind.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but something. And in fact, the house that we're in currently had a bunch of stuff in the attic. Broken Christmas yard decor and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's in your way, obviously you're going to move it, but this was not. Ron kind of just thought, well, it's probably just leftover material from at some point when like the house was built or something. He wasn't really sure. And he never really thought twice about it. He wasn't thrilled that the buyer wanted him to dispose of it, but he understood. So he figured he'd start by trying to set it out on the curb for the garbage pickup.
Yeah.
Only when he went to move it, he realized it was way too heavy. So he waited until the movers came to help him move it to the curb. They managed to get it to the curb, but neglected to think about the fact that there are weight limits on what the garbage collectors will take. So the next day, the trash pickup came and went, and the can was left with a note telling Ron he would need to open up the barrel and unload some of the weight in order for them to take it. So using a screwdriver, he opened the seal of the barrel and lifted the lid that released an absolute toxic odor. After taking a step back and regaining his composure, he realized a woman's boot had surfaced in the thick liquid. It was difficult to know for sure because throughout the liquid, there was like some sort of material in the form of like little pellets or beads. But he thought he saw a hand as well. The look on your face.
Slow blink of... I always, whenever we talk about stuff like this, that's just so shocking. I put myself in their position and I am like just thinking to myself, what the hell do you do now?
Mm-hmm.
Hands up and back up. That's what you do.
Yes. And that's what he did. And he immediately called the police.
Yeah, and I'm not moving from the spot because I'm not going to let anybody else look in that barrel. Nobody else is touching the barrel. Stay back. This is COVID 6 feet radius around the barrel.
Yeah. And, well, Ron turned out to be right. It was a body entombed in the barrel.
Oh my gosh. And they lived there for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What liquid is it in that you can still see a hand in it?
Oh, we'll get. Actually, the hand in the picture, the hand is like right on top. I think he was just in disbelief of like, no way is this a hand.
I'm gonna look this up.
So, detectives were just as shocked as Ron because it wasn't bones they were looking at, but a hand like skin covered.
That's my thought.
Of course, detectives questioned Ron about the barrel, but did quickly conclude that he was likely being honest. After all, he did call the cops, and he seemed just as shocked and didn't seem to know anything about the barrel other than it had been under his house for the past 10 years.
Right. I mean, there's no reason to not believe him at this point.
Yeah, the lead detective on the case said this was the craziest and like most horrific scene. They're just all kind of standing there at first going, how do we deal with this? Like, how do you even begin?
Yeah, where do you start?
What do we do? How do we get this body out of the barrel? How do it, Well, emergency services had to come and bring a lift to get the barrel on a vehicle for transport.
Right, because they can't let any of the liquid out. They can't drill holes in it.
Because nobody could lift it.
Yeah.
It weighed over 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Once they got it to the medical examiner's office, they set the barrel on a sheet of plastic and a team clad in gas masks tipped the barrel on its side. Initially, all that came out was a dark green fluid, which was unusual.
Yeah, that's not what I thought it would be.
According to detectives, because decomposition fluid is typically transparent or maybe red of some reddish, brownish something from the blood. No, this was like green. Dark green, like green. But with the liquid out, they realized that the barrel had been almost filled with those pellets I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
They weren't sure why, but theorized it was either to weigh down the body or disguise it somehow, like hoping that if somebody opened it up, all they would see was pellets. But over time, there's decomposition liquid and the green liquid, and so it all sort of dispersed, and then you could see.
I hope you know that I'm picturing Orbeez. Like the water beads.
Yeah, that's kind of what they weren't brightly colored, but
no,
yeah.
right.
Well, the body would not come out of the barrel just by tipping it, so they actually had to pull it out. And can I just say, this rock star of a medical examiner, the only woman on camera in the room, was the one to pull the body out.
Of course.
This little woman.
Because we're built different.
Just gets up in there and is like
Come
bent
on,
over.
Girl, get out.
Yanking this body out.
Well, you know what, though? Not to get all deep, but I'm going to get deep for a second. Because as the only, like you said, only woman on camera. So there may have been other women in the room. But like, yes. As a woman, you know that most crime, not most, but like a crime like this is probably against a woman. So it makes me feel something in my little heart that it was a woman that unearthed her and pulled her out, and that, I don't know, made me feel something.
Yeah.
My Grinch heart grew.
You would be correct. Your Grinch heart is correct. But to everyone's shock, despite seeing the hand, they saw the hand, the entire body was mummified, basically.
Whoa.
The skin and internal organs had all like perfectly dried into like leatherish looking.
Was it like silica gel beads to like pull the moisture out, maybe?
It was plastic.
Isn't that what silica is, though?
It's like, yes, but no.
Okay.
Yeah, these were just, you'll understand the plastic
that's fine.
In a minute. Yeah. She was obviously not fully formed looking because she had been all crumpled up in the barrel, but like she was intact.
Yeah.
It was obviously a woman.
Yeah.
I didn't specifically say that, but obviously as they pulled her out, they realized it was a woman. The next thing the detectives noted was her clothing. She was fully dressed. I had mentioned the boot came up. It was like a little, it was a certain style of boot, okay? She was fully dressed in what now would be considered vintage clothing. A faux leopard skin coat and a popular dress and shoes, the boots, from the 1960s.
Wow.
This gave them sort of an approximate time, because you just have to work with what you know. So they're looking at this time frame going, oh my gosh, this is 1999. She looks like she came straight out of the 60s. But they weren't sure. Because maybe she just liked vintage clothing, and they didn't really know. But what they did know was the cause of death. That was very obvious. Though the front of her head was still covered in thick black hair, all of the hair on the back of her head had fallen out, and there was clear evidence of blunt force trauma to her skull. Detectives said that the wounds also signified that the killer likely knew the victim and killed her out of anger. She was a small-framed woman who they believe could have been killed by just like one or two blows, but the killer had obviously hit her excessively. Once they had straightened out her body and could see her face, their next clue in identifying her came through her dental work. The medical examiner explained to detectives that the gold inlay, such as she had, was often used in Central America, not the U.S. Okay. Detectives were not comforted by this, as it indicated they were likely looking for the identity of an immigrant from the 1960s or 70s, which would prove challenging.
Yeah.
Then they were faced with the disturbing news that the medical examiner discovered the bones of an almost full-term fetus within her body.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Almost full term. She was like 9 months pregnant.
Yes. Instantly, detectives suspected that the pregnancy had something to do with her murder, but some of the other evidence in the barrel left them puzzled. Among the other items found in the barrel were her personal belongings like a purse, but there was also about a 6-inch plastic stem with leaves, just one. No flowers on it, just the stem.
Okay.
They didn't know if it was relevant to the case or just a random piece of trash left in the barrel. Either way, of course, they kept it. Within her purse, they found basically a time capsule of items. The typical thing that any woman would have carried in a purse in the 1960s, you know, compact mirror, eyeliner, blush, a comb, and an address book. For those of you that are Gen Zs.
I know what an address book is.
Or for those of us that have forgotten, because we have all the technology now. People used to carry actual little address books with their friends and families, like addresses, phone numbers, etc.
I still use my mom's. I used it recently when I was starting to work on wedding invitations.
Nice.
So I know what an address book is.
I figured you would, but I'm sure that there's, like, my kids even would maybe be like, what? And then they'd have to think about it for a minute to go, oh yeah, I guess you didn't have cell phones to keep phone numbers and you had to potentially call people from other people's phones or a payphone. So, while knowing it would have been helpful in identifying the woman, detectives were skeptical because of its condition. It had been sitting in body fluids and whatever the green liquid was for at least 30-ish years.
Yeah.
So one detective explained that it was so saturated, you could have literally poked holes in it if you squeezed it too hard.
Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah. Fortunately, their forensic department had a way to dry it out.
Silica beads.
No, they actually had like a little oven almost, but it does it like very, very super. Yeah, it's more like a dehydrator. So they decided to try it. Let's try and dry it out and see if we can get any information from it. But they knew that it would take some time. Yeah. And obviously detectives had to keep working. So in the meantime, they searched missing persons reports, but came up empty-handed.
Well, I mean, yeah, they were probably expecting that because, like we previously said,
they knew that it would be difficult to track down, especially an immigrant from back then. But to their surprise, the forensic department had made some progress with the address book, and they were able to open the front cover, and inside was the letter A with a multiple-digit number that followed.
Okay.
Detectives saw it as possible confirmation that she was an immigrant because that is something that they used to use, and they called it their alien number.
Okay.
So, the Department of Immigration confirmed and was able to provide them with her name and the date she entered the U.S.
Okay.
Her name was Reyna Angelica Marroquin. She was from El Salvador, and she had come to the U.S. in 1966 alone in hopes of attaining her dream career in fashion. However, she had regularly written to her family about her experiences in New York until the winter of 1968. So only 2 years was she here before she went missing. When her letters and calls stopped, her family had no idea how to find her. So detectives' next steps were to confirm who had owned Ron Cohen's house through the years and find any potential connections to Reyna. The house was built in 1962 and only had 4 owners throughout the years.
Okay.
They ran background checks on each of them and found no criminal records. Before they attempted to talk to any of the previous owners, they decided to look into the barrel first. They checked with the manufacturer of the barrel, who was able to tell them that it had been made in March of 1963 because of the number spray painted on the side of the can. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, they had also kept records of who they sold all the barrels to, and the company they sold it to was actually still in business.
Oh.
It was sold to a plastics manufacturing business and was used in, drumroll please,
Drum roll.
the dyeing of plastics, including fake flowers and leaves.
Whoa, it all comes together. Well, the barrel part.
Yeah. Before they finished following up with that information, though, the forensics department notified them that the address book had finished drying out. Of course, much of the information was illegible after the damage done to it, but they did manage to get some phone numbers from it.
Okay.
They didn't expect much to come from it. After all, what was the likelihood that people kept the same phone number for 30 years? And before anybody says, no, you keep the same number, you didn't. With landlines,
Yeah.
back then, you usually wouldn't be able to keep the same number if you moved because there would be an overlap in setting up the service. And you literally were not allowed to keep the same number if you moved to a different area code. So people changed numbers when they moved most of the time.
Okay.
To detectives' surprise, though, one person, out of all the people they called, one person did keep her number.
Whoa.
And she knew Reyna. In fact, she possibly knew her better than anyone else in New York. The woman turned out to be Kathy Andrade, a close friend of Reyna's, and she was happy to talk to detectives.
I'm sure.
She broke down in tears when detectives showed her a picture of Reyna to confirm their victim was the same woman that she had known back then. She told them that she had met Reyna shortly after Reyna arrived to New York and was looking for a job. Kathy worked in the garment industry and had helped Reyna get a position at the same company. She went on to tell them that she too was from El Salvador, so she and Reyna had become inseparable. Both being alone from El Salvador, she said that in the year before Reyna went missing, she had told her that she was going to have to move out of the Catholic Services residence that she had been living because she was pregnant with her married boyfriend's child.
Right. They typically Catholics don't love that.
Right. And the boyfriend moved Reyna to an apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey, and had been taking really good care of her and continuously told her that he was going to leave his wife and marry her.
That's what they all say.
Mm-hmm.
Don't date married men. Men don't cheat on your wives.
Yeah. When Reyna was nearly full term in her pregnancy, the man informed her that he was in fact not going to leave his wife. And that's when Kathy received a call from her stating she had done a, quote, foolish thing. Reyna told Kathy she had called his wife and confessed about the affair and that she was pregnant. And now the boyfriend was angry with her, and she specifically told Kathy, quote, he's going to kill me.
Wow.
And Kathy took this seriously. She told her, I'm coming over to stay with you, so don't worry. I've got your back. But remember, Reyna is now in Hoboken, New Jersey, and Kathy lived in Manhattan.
I was going to say, that's a long way from Hoboken.
So it's like distance-wise, it might not be super, super far, but it takes
time to get there.
It takes time to get anywhere in New York City. So she headed out right away, but when she got to Reyna's apartment, the door was unlocked and no one was there, but there was still warm food on the dining table untouched.
I mean, the panic. The panic.
Kathy waited several hours for Reyna to come back, and when she didn't, Kathy went to the police to file a missing persons report. Be prepared to be mad.
I'm already angry.
The officer she spoke to told her that it had only been a few hours, so Reyna was not considered missing yet.
Well, and I had that thought when the food is still warm, like, what if she had just forgotten something at the store and she just went to the store? You know what I'm saying? Which she wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
We know that that's not the case. But I knew they weren't going to take it seriously at this point.
Yeah. Kathy reluctantly went back home, and the next day she tried again. This time, the officer turned her away from filing a report because she wasn't related to Reyna.
But she's an immigrant, and there's nobody here who's related to her.
Exactly. So our legal lesson today is going to be about missing persons reports, but we'll get into that after the story. So all Kathy could do was continue to try to contact Reyna, which she did for a while, but was never able to find her. Kathy lived for 31 years, concerned about the whereabouts of Reyna, but had come to hope that maybe she just simply had fled back to El Salvador.
Yeah,
she had no idea.
You'd have to hope because it
didn't appear that way.
But she had to hope for that.
Yeah. Detectives now just had to find which owner of the home in Jericho Reyna had connection to.
Or the married boyfriend had connection to.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thinking too much.
No, it's, yep, you're good. Because you would think there would be more degrees of separation. You would think.
Don't tell me.
As he looked back through the history of the home, he found a record that indicated that the second owner of the home had applied for a permit for the addition where the barrel was found. The permit was dated in 1980, but still they thought there had to be a connection. So they went to him and they asked that owner, Arthur Eben, to come in for an interview, and it did not start well. He denied building the addition to the house and explained that he had simply been bringing it up to code. It was, in fact, the first owner of the home that had built it.
Well, I was thinking timeline-wise, it doesn't quite, but it doesn't quite match, does it?
No.
And so my brain was, he was trying to sell the house and it needed to be up to code because there wasn't a permit pulled in the first place.
Actually, I think he was trying to bring it up to code like once he bought the house.
Oh, well, that was nice of him. He didn't have to do that.
Or something. Because of the time frames.
Regardless.
But yeah, there we are. With the shocking story being well reported in local papers, Arthur probably heard about what they had found because he surprised the detectives, and the next thing out of his mouth was, "Oh, and I saw that barrel under the porch when I lived there, but I left it."
Yeah.
Just like Ron Cohen, Arthur had thought it might have something to do with the construction or the addition of the house and just had like construction materials or something
extra
in it.
Flooring or,
Yeah. And with how heavy it was, he thought, I could even see them thinking like maybe they like mixed concrete in there or something and just left it. And so now it's like way too heavy. So everybody just dismissed it.
And I can't blame them for that. I would do the same thing.
With that being said, detectives next asked him what he remembered about the first homeowner. It was a man named Howard Elkins. And Arthur actually remembered quite a bit. He remembered that Howard was married with a couple kids, and he said he believed he was involved in or the owner of a plastics flower company in the city.
It's all coming together.
Like I said, you'd think there'd be more degrees of separation,
but
there's really not. When detectives looked into it and found the company that had bought the barrel from the manufacturer, they confirmed that yes, it was Melrose Plastics and that Howard Elkins formerly owned it along with a man named Melvin Gantman. The partners had sold the company in 1971, but detectives were able to track down Melvin and found he was very cooperative. He immediately identified the barrel as one that they would use to dye products in. He also recognized the green liquid as matching the color that they would use to dye shrubbery or leaves. So then the detectives turned the focus to Howard and asked if he ever knew of him having affairs or a girlfriend. and Melvin confirmed that Howard had a girlfriend that worked at the factory. Melvin described her as an attractive younger woman who was petite with long black hair, and he remembered her having gold in her teeth.
I just want to say how it is so ballsy to leave the body of your mistress in your basement, like in your crawl space when you move. Like, what did he think was going to happen when he, like, if the second owner had gone straight down like 3 days after they closed and opened it up? What did he think was going to happen? They would have known exactly who it was. They wouldn't have had this 30-year gap.
Yep.
I'm going to say it. Bitches be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
What is wrong with him? Oh, and, the killing of his pregnant girlfriend.
Yes.
I
just want to explain this because in one of my sources, a detective is not quoted, but one of the articles talks about how the detective says that when they didn't just question Melvin. I just go over that because I had that in more detail. Yeah. But they did supposedly question like former workers at the plastics factory. And supposedly some of those workers told detectives that Reyna actually had a son before this pregnancy and used to bring him into the factory and he would play, and everybody speculated that he was Howard's child. Only records show that she didn't get to the U.S. until 1966.
Yeah.
And her first job was at the garment factory with her friend Kathy. And then she was like 9 months pregnant at the end of 1968. Like she went missing at the end of 1968. So I don't think that is accurate. It
was probably somebody else's bringing their kid.
Yeah, either they're mixing her up with somebody else because who knows who's to say that this guy didn't have affairs with other women who worked in the factory, who were probably also immigrants. So I just want to specify that that's why I'm not putting that in the story because I don't know how factual that is. It was just something rumored. So, and it's just not making a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that if she up and went missing, where was the son? If she had a first child, where was he? If her friend Kathy didn't have him, which she didn't.
And Kathy never mentioned it.
Kathy never mentioned it.
Well, she left her son,
Yeah.
So
where would the son, why wouldn't they have looked for this missing woman if she had abandoned her son with a babysitter or something?
Yeah.
And
they wanted somebody related to her, but nobody came forward with the child. It
just didn't add up. So I'm thinking that was just somebody misremembered that or something.
Yeah.
So I just want to make that clear. In any case, detectives now had all they needed to move forward with questioning Howard Elkins. But they found that he had retired to sunny Florida.
I know.
And at that point, he was 70 years old.
I hope they put his 70-year-old ass in jail. Although this is Florida. Oh, well, he's not going to be tried in Florida.
No, I can't say what I was going to say.
Oop.
Okay. Oh. So the detectives flew to Florida and knocked on Howard's door. He was very welcoming and invited them in.
Yeah, because he's got 30 years thinking he got away with it.
Mm-hmm.
Newsflash, buddy.
Yeah. They went through the same questions that they had with Melvin, only they got very different answers.
Oh?
Howard said they never used barrels like that in the plastics business. He also denied the green dye ever being used.
You never used green dye when dyeing florals, Howard?
Mm-hmm.
Ever?
Not like that. Nope.
Like what then?
I don't know. He didn't say. He didn't have an answer. He just said no. I don't recognize that. We don't use that. To their surprise, he admitted he had had an affair with a young woman. But he claimed he didn't remember anything about her, even though he admitted it was a long-term affair. He said, I don't remember what she looked like. I don't remember her name. He told them there was no way he could describe her, not even the color of her hair.
Not even the color of her hair? Really? I mean, men are oblivious, but some men are oblivious, but not that oblivious.
Yeah. So they asked if he could explain how there was a barrel with a body in it under the house he owned at the time she went missing. He simply said, I don't know. I have no explanation. I have no knowledge of it. They said, okay, well then, can we get a DNA sample from you to compare to the baby she was pregnant with, just to exclude you? And he said, oh no, I can't allow that. They tried to explain, well, it's just an investigative tool that they use that will potentially rule you out as a suspect. And he immediately became defensive, saying things like, no, I know what you guys can do with that. Look at what they did to OJ.
Look at what they did to OJ.
Even the detective in the interview for the documentary that I watched, like, kind of like smirked and rolled his eyes a little bit at that statement.
I just want to say, OJ Simpson wrote a book called If I Did It, where he detailed what would happen if he had done it, because he had done it. So don't think they really needed to manipulate too much there.
So detectives warned him that they believed he was involved and they would be getting what they had to get with or without his cooperation. And the conversation was suddenly interrupted by a phone ringing. Howard took the call, and when he hung up, he told them it was his wife and that he needed them to leave because you can't be here when she gets home. Why, Howard? Why?
Can you imagine finding out this big of a secret about your husband 30 years later, that you've been living with this monster?
Yeah, but you know what? Can you imagine a woman calling and telling you that she's had a long-term affair with your husband and is now pregnant with his child, and then you never hear another thing about her, and she worked at his factory and she's just gone? She just vanishes and you never speak of it again? I would be questioning that. I don't care. I'd be questioning it. I'd be like, where is she?
Right. But I mean, if she disappeared, then he would easily be able to say, oh, she was just trying to like get money from me or extort. Like, I can see how he could explain that.
I'm too suspicious of a person. I'd be like, what happened to her? Where'd she? I need proof. And if he was like, well, she went back to El Salvador, I need proof. Because that's how I
see, and that's my thing. I don't know if I would. And like, I would now that we've talked about this case, but like, generally, I trust Nicholas with my life. Like, I trust him with everything. Yeah. And if he tells me something, I don't usually be like, I'm not usually like.
That's because I got you saying that. I don't usually be like. Yeah, I'll give her a pass, especially back then.
Right.
Like,
especially in the time when your husband is, you know.
Yeah. We won't get into all that business, but you know, it still made me, as a wife, it made me a little bit frustrated because
I think I would have looked into it a little bit more than she did.
Yeah.
But if she disappeared and he kept saying, I promise you I had nothing to do with it, like, I can see why she would be like, well, I have no proof otherwise. I have no proof other than what she said, and she's now gone.
Yeah.
I don't know. She also probably didn't want to think that her husband was capable of murder.
True.
That's the tea on that. Except this is water. I don't drink tea. It makes me hyper.
I do. I love it. I love tea. Kind of have a problem. Well, the detectives had no choice.
Yeah, they have to leave.
They had to leave. But they left him with the knowledge that they would be back with a warrant to collect that DNA sample.
Hell yeah, they will.
And then they immediately went to a local judge to get the warrant. But, you know, even that's going to take a day or so.
Yeah, I mean, somebody has to write it, and then it has to get in front of the judge,
right.
And then it has to be signed, and then they have to get it back to you.
Well,
I almost said this was before emails, but that's not true.
No, there was email
emails
in 1999.
Yeah. It was before Outlook.
But email was just email. Like, I don't remember really using like attachments and stuff at that point. I could be wrong.
I'm gonna Google when attachments to an email were a thing. I have to know these things. Google AI says the first attachments were made possible in 1980.
What?
1985 is when it became like a readily available thing.
Wow.
1985.
Well, I was.
But did they have a scanner? They had a scanner.
That's where I'm like, and in the legal field, we know that in the legal field,
things move slow.
They're
technology
slow to adapt to technology.
They are so slow to adapt to technology.
Yeah.
We are. Sidebar.
Yeah.
We are. I just attended a long CLE recently about how we're gonna start incorporating AI into the discovery sorting process. For those of you who don't know, when you're working with like civil litigation cases of any sort of large size, you're going to get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of documents in discovery. Like we have a case that I think has over 15 million documents in discovery. And that is all held in a big software. We use a software called Relativity, but it's an offloaded software. But somebody has to sort through that and figure out what's good and what you can use and what's useful. And like a lot of it is just like duplicate emails. And that takes time.
Yeah.
And
holy crap.
That costs clients a lot of money. So we're starting to get to a point with AI technology that it can sort through that for you, which is really cool.
Key things.
Yes, and it can find like the duplicates. It can find duplicates in the metadata. It can find corrupted files. It can find this, and it can, if you give it a theme, like if you just say we need stuff about this subject, it can sort through it.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so hopefully it's going to end up saving clients money in the long run because they're not having to pay an attorney hourly. But right now it is expensive to use that software, so it's not something that we can use yet. But I thought that was pretty cool. It's coming. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is.
Computer.
Hey, pewter. Okay. Well,
they got the warrant, right?
Well.
What? No, what?
The next day, the lead detective called his office in New York to give them an update on the case and was informed that the Palm Beach PD had called them asking if they had arrested Howard Elkins because his wife reported him missing. By the time the New York detectives touched base with the Palm Beach PD, they had already located Howard.
Find that grandpa!
Howard was found in the back seat of a friend's vehicle, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot.
I knew when you said he was missing, I knew he had killed himself. What a coward. Yep. You live with this secret for 30 years and you can't own up to it.
It turned out that he purchased a 12-gauge shotgun and ammunition after being questioned and apparently chose to take his life. Where his friend would find him instead of his wife is the only conclusion I could come up with as to, like, why would you go into the back seat of your friend's vehicle in their garage?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like, if you don't want your wife to find you, but...
And this, of course, solidified in detectives' minds that, okay, yeah, you definitely
for sure
killed Reyna.
For sure.
But still, they wanted to confirm.
So now they can get that DNA sample.
Exactly.
With or without a warrant.
Exactly.
I mean, I think you still need a warrant, but...
Well, they were definitely going to get the warrant after that. So they did. They compared the DNA, and he was a match as the father of Reyna's baby. The theory is that Howard showed up at the apartment after she got off the phone with Kathy, and he somehow convinced Reyna that he wasn't angry and like they would work it out or he would fix it because they believe that he convinced her to go with him. And he took her to the factory where he bludgeoned her with a hammer or similar tool approximately 7 to 10 times, placed her body in the barrel, and then took the barrel along with 4 50-pound bags of pellets. They believe he took it to his home. And then the plan was to use the pellets to weigh down the barrel so he could dispose of it in like a body of water.
Yeah.
Only he placed the pellets in the barrel at his house and then couldn't move it by himself.
Right.
So he left it there, I guess hoping that somebody would either just dispose of it without looking inside.
Right, which almost happened.
Or he was always looking over his shoulder for 31 years.
Wow.
Crazy.
Well, but you know what I will say? There's something so satisfying to me about the way that they pretty quickly were able to put this case together.
Yes.
Like, they were on their game.
Yes. And also, well, that's part of my legal lesson, so I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, pretty much everyone invested in this case, meaning detectives, medical examiners, even the one in particular reporter, but the reporters were furious about this whole case.
Yeah.
Like, they were furious over the fact that this man took advantage of a young immigrant worker who worked for him and disposed of her when she posed a threat to life as he knew it.
It's horrific.
And then instead of spending 30 years in jail, he got to live it out.
Mm-hmm.
And people believed he was a man of character and integrity, and he got to watch his family grow. And
I hope she haunted the living hell out of him. I hope that every time he turned a corner, he saw her face, and that she freaked him out everywhere. I hope he was paranoid his entire life.
Well, despite Howard taking away their chance at seeing justice served, detectives still took the time to track down Reyna's family in El Salvador.
That was very nice of them.
I'm going to warn you, this might make you cry.
Okay.
When they were unable to find the family through the information they obtained in the investigation, they turned to a local reporter who had been covering the case from the beginning, Oscar Corral. He says he just literally showed up in the town in El Salvador, where she was from, and had to just start knocking on doors and asking people if they knew this family.
I have goosebumps just went down my whole body.
When he found out where the family home was and he arrived, they were actually celebrating Reyna's mother's 93rd birthday. And the family kind of invited him in, and it was obvious that they assumed that he was there to write a puff piece story on her birthday, is like she was one of the oldest women in their town.
Yeah.
But he pulled out the news article with Reyna's picture and showed her, and she immediately began weeping. And she told Oscar that for years she had a recurring dream that Reyna was trapped in a barrel going over a waterfall, and that she herself was only still alive, holding on because she wanted to live long enough to find out what happened to Reyna. And if you're ready for it, the remains of Reyna and her baby were returned to El Salvador and given a proper funeral and burial. And then Reyna's mother died just a month later and was buried next to them.
We're kidding.
I wasn't kidding when I said you're going to want to cry.
I think that this is the first case that we've covered that I've actually, I'm actually about to start crying.
Yeah. See why I wanted to cover it, even though it doesn't have legals.
But you know what? This team, everybody who touched this case, did right by her as best they could.
Yeah.
And she needed that after her neglect in her life.
So the other reason that I was willing to cover it, despite there not being a court case, is that the legal lesson in this stood out to me because I was appalled to hear that Kathy was turned away. I wasn't appalled to hear that she was turned away the first time because, it's too soon. Because that is still something that people believe. And I think it's because it used to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer the case. So we'll get to that part in a second. But I could not believe that she was turned away for not being a family member, especially for an immigrant.
Yeah.
who had no family in the U.S. How were they supposed to?
In New York and New Jersey, where people immigrate in all the time.
Yeah. Because I feel with how, I don't want to say easy, because I'm sure this case wasn't easy to solve, but with how they were able to piece this together all these years later.
Well, and there's like very few degrees of separation, like you said.
Exactly. And so it's so maddening, because if she had been able to file that missing persons report, I feel like as long as they appropriately investigated, there's a good chance Howard Elkins would have been caught and would have done his time.
Because if they had gone straight up to her place of work to ask maybe 4 people some questions, somebody would have known, because they already had all those rumors.
Yes, exactly. I feel like they would have figured out enough between even talking to his wife, who probably, hopefully, would be honest and say, well, yeah, I did get a phone call from this woman. And they probably could have gotten a search warrant, and they would have found her. So maddening. So that led me to look up a little bit, or whatever I could, on the history of missing person laws.
Okay.
And now I couldn't confirm whether the officers back then were actually being truthful with Kathy on what the law was, because obviously that's a long time ago, and I would probably need to go to a law library, because I found nada on Google, on the Googs. But what I did find is that they actually probably were being honest about it, from what I did find.
Okay.
Most states simply allowed whatever police department the report was filed at to like take on the investigation. And there wasn't any national organizations or databases like there are now, which that part's not super shocking. But it appears that across our country, missing person laws were like pretty loosey-goosey in general until like the 1980s, when they finally started cracking down on child abductions.
Mm-hmm.
But it really wasn't until like the 1990s and 2000s that the laws began changing to allow for stricter protections for adults.
Wow.
Because for adults, they were like, well, they're an adult. They probably just took off. They probably don't want to be found. They probably,
Right.
Thankfully today, both New York and New Jersey law specifies that police departments must not only accept a missing persons report from any adult who has a relationship with the missing person that would allow them to know the typical whereabouts.
Right.
But they also no longer have a waiting period. So, FYI, I think that used to be true, but it's still like kind of perpetuated in TV and movies and such.
I would have thought that for sure, that you had to wait.
Right. So I'm fairly certain that a lot of those laws have changed across the U.S. So this is sort of a legal lesson and a PSA that if you ever find yourself having to file a missing persons report, no, you likely do not need to be a family member, nor do you need to wait. If they tell you that, then seriously, just Google missing person laws in whatever state you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And sites like I found both New York and New Jersey on Justia US Law.
Yeah.
It's a website, and it will give you the exact language of that state's statute for...
Right. And also, like, for if you're in Florida, for specifics, you can Google, like, from a law perspective, I would just Google missing persons Florida statute, and the Florida statutes come right up. Most statutes for each state are just online, and if you type in, the statute will pop right up.
Yes.
Your laws are readily available. Research them yourself. Know what you have.
Yeah. And these days, laws are more and more written to be
understandable.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that the average person can understand them.
Mm-hmm.
They're finally getting around to requiring that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Wow. This was a fantastic case.
Thank you. I mean.
No, but it's just.
I feel weird saying thank you because, like, I'm just reporting the information.
Right. But wow.
But I thought so.
Well, it makes me happy that she's with her mom. And her mom is with her grandbaby.
Yeah.
And her baby. She probably didn't even know she had a grandbaby.
No, she didn't. Because Reyna never told them.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was ashamed. She was probably waiting, hoping that he was actually going to leave his wife and marry her. And then she could say, oh, by the way, I got married and I have a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm speechless, but in such a great way. Like, I mean, obviously it's a horrific case, but I'm very touched by how it ended and that people were there for her and they did their best to right the wrong that was done at her time of death.
Yes. So if you've made it this far in the episode and want a Sunday shout out, leave us a little dress emoji for Reyna in all her fashion. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, you guys. We will talk to you next Thursday or whatever day you listen. I always do that. But yeah, enjoy.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, guys. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Burden of Proof Pod and email us at burdenofproofpod@gmail.com.